Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we're talking about 3 big wins for Trump and conservatives in the Supreme Court this week. If you hadn't heard, the Democrats were already pretty triggered this week and, well, after today's news, it looks like they ain't seen nothing yet. You see, I think this picture tweeted by Ben Shapiro says it pretty nicely, actually. Democrats 12 hours ago versus Democrats now. At first the Democrats, just last week, the left was just at a Dennis Leary level of crazy and angry. They were mad but still kind of jovial about it. For example, Democrats had things like news host Rachel Maddow crying about fake pictures of child separation. And then we saw seasoned actor Peter Fonda calling for kids to be taken from their parents and raped and murdered. Not kidding. A little contradictory to the child separation narrative, I know, but that's what we're working with. And then, to top things off, earlier this week, Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters was calling for more pushback and confrontation and harassment of the people in the streets, of the conservative people and Trump staffers, IRL. And funny enough, Laura Loomer actually came up and turned the tables on Maxine shortly after her announcement, but apparently Waters' calls for public harassment were only meant to be aimed at Republicans. Of course they were.
You just encouraged your supporters. You just encouraged your supporters to harass Trump supporters and officials.
Please come to my office.
I just wanted to ask you, where are conservatives allowed to go?
Please come
Are there
to my
separate?
office and talk with me.
Do we sit at the back of the bus?
And as if the liberals couldn't take any more L's this week, today's story about the Supreme Court has 3 new wins for our side, which will show you why the left has gone from Dennis Leary here all the way to full Willem Dafoe. Ouch. First of all, let's recap. The Supreme Court of the United States is, of course, the highest court in the land. They consist of 9 top judges who are appointed to their positions by the sitting presidents for life. They have lifelong terms, and these details about their terms and nominations will come up more later in today's story. But let's talk about their most recent rulings first. As the Supreme Court's term comes to a close this month, a number of big important issues are being voted on. We already saw one go down earlier this month when the Supreme Court decided to side with that baker who refused to make the gay wedding cake. And in the face of that huge loss, we of course remember how the left tried to rebrand the story as a narrow victory, using technical legalese language in order to generalize things in articles and try and make their loss not look so bad. And now, for today's new ruling, in this week's big news, the Supreme Court has decided to uphold Trump's travel ban. Hooray! Our country will remain safe and secure, and people from those troubled countries won't be allowed to freely enter the US and make problems here too. But of course, once again, the left-wing mainstream media is putting their own spin on this too. You see, this is the ban which they have been calling the Muslim ban ever since it came out last year. But even though a number of the countries on the ban are Muslim majority, that doesn't mean it's a Muslim ban. Not at all. This is just more word games and propaganda tactics from the left. Calling it Muslim ban triggers their base, who not only want to side with Muslims whenever they can, for some weird reason, they also like to protect the minorities and prop up black and brown people in order to virtue signal to their libtard friends. Here's a video from the Washington Post on this topic. Check it out.
The court, on a 5-4 vote, upheld President Trump's travel ban, which restricts immigration from certain countries with mostly Muslim populations.
You see, this is already misleading. They want to make it sound like the countries are getting banned because they're Muslim majority. They're not. They're getting banned because their countries are not safe, and they're not complying with international rules like the rest of the world. If this was a Muslim ban, then why would Venezuela and North Korea be on the list? They're not Muslim, and if Trump really wanted to ban Muslims, why not ban some of the biggest Muslim countries out there, like India or Bangladesh or something? And well, we all know that's because this is not a Muslim ban at all, and to suggest it is dishonest hogwash.
The court said that this was squarely within the president's powers and his ability to protect the country and to control the borders. There was a very passionate dissent from Justice Sotomayor from the bench in which she read some of the president's anti-Muslim tweets and said, let that sink in. That's from the President of the United States.
Okay, that's cute and all, and I know the left loves Muslims and wants to prop them up and shit, but are we really gonna sit here and pretend Islam is not a problem? These people are acting like 9/11 never happened, for Christ's sake. And they're ignoring the fact that Muslims are responsible for the majority of the world's terrorism too. So, with that said, I think it's great Trump has been critical of them, and more people should be, actually.
They found these countries deficient, and they said that this really is not a Muslim ban. In fact, most of the countries with very large Muslim populations are not part of the ban.
Exactly, and those claims are all true. So continuing to call it the Muslim ban is pretty despicable then, especially for a supposed news outlet like the Washington Post.
It's a great victory for our Constitution.
Even though lower courts had struck it down, the Supreme Court earlier had allowed it to go into effect while it considered the case. So it's already been in effect.
It's in effect, it's been approved, and our country is better off for it. Looks like despite the media trying to tear this country apart, we finally got leaders like Trump and the Supreme Court who will stand up for it and do their jobs and protect this great nation.
That was brought out in the dissents from 2 of the justices who were worried that that program wasn't really working.
This guy really sounds disappointed, but I don't see why. It's really hard to see why liberals do anything they do nowadays. All week we've been dealing with their demands for more unsafe foreigners to be let into our nation, whether it's illegal aliens crossing the southern border at Mexico illegally, or now we're talking about foreign internationals from dangerous Muslim countries they want to bring in too. Between that and calling for the public harassment of their opponents in the streets, I would say it's pretty clear that Democrats are trying to destroy this country and start chaos. The next good news to come out of the Supreme Court this week is a little smaller and less juicy, but it's a win for Americans nonetheless. And you know, when CNN posts an article like this saying the Supreme Court deals a major blow to public sector unions, well, since we usually want the opposite of what CNN wants, this actually sounds like it'll be good for us now. Trade unions are known to be corrupt and money grubbing. Sure, they protect the workers and offer people great benefits if you can qualify, but that is the trick. Most unions are run by long legacies, generations of families and friends who try and keep a real tight lockdown on their jobs. There's cronyism and nepotism and everything in there to worry about. It's really hard to get in, and that's not even mentioning the corruption in unions. Bribing politicians, dirty deals, working with the mob, all of these are strong, terrible precedents that have been set by unions in the past, and things I've heard about personally, especially in Illinois, which is where the Supreme Court struck down the law this week. A law that required non-union workers to pay fees that go to collective bargaining for the unions. Basically, unions were getting fees from non-union people, and of course they love that, and so does CNN. But thankfully, finally, the Supreme Court overturned this nonsense. And this bullshit shouldn't be surprising coming out of Illinois. The Chicago area has been known to be one of the biggest and most corrupt places in the country. That is where Barack Hussein Obama came up in politics. Just saying. And as a person who grew up in Illinois and heard many stories, everyone from that state knows that the politicians and the unions are corrupt as shit. And they're also, of course, starkly left-wing and overwhelmingly Democrat. Shocker. So it's no wonder why CNN, the virtual voice of the Democratic Party, well, it's no wonder why they're trying to report this story with the angle that it's a big blow for public sector unions. What biased, agenda-pushing propaganda bullcrap? Why are they so easy to side with the unions anyway? Everywhere I've been and people I've talked to, there's always been a debate about whether or not unions were good and whether or not they were corrupt or even necessary. But the Clinton News Network, of course, they go right along with this like it's fucking normal and totally okay. And I say that's pathetic. Now that brings us to the final bit of news that's just breaking now from the Supreme Court. As I was writing this video, it was announced that the Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy will be retiring from the bench, which means, more importantly, President Trump is going to get a second high court pick. This is going to have huge ramifications for the future, guys, because, like I said before, these justices have lifelong terms. So, unless they choose to retire gracefully, like how Kennedy is, unless they do that, they can stay a Supreme Court justice until they die. And this means Trump is going to have the opportunity to nominate someone who is not only smart, fair, and qualified, but also lenient to conservative issues. And frankly, we already got enough left-wing lunatics like Judge Sotomayor, who we just saw reading tweets in court earlier for dramatic effect. Now we're going to see Trump pick a second Supreme Court justice, getting us another base conservative in power, this time potentially for many decades. Let's read some of the article to get some more details. Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy announced his retirement Wednesday, giving President Donald Trump the chance to cement conservative control of the High Court. The 81-year-old Kennedy said in a statement he's stepping down after more than 30 years on the court. A Republican appointee, he has held a key vote on such high-profile issues as abortion, affirmative action, gay rights, guns, campaign finance, and voting rights. Kennedy said he has informed his colleagues and Trump of his plans, and that his retirement will take effect at the end of July. Trump praised Kennedy as a man of tremendous vision and said his search for a new justice would begin immediately. That's great to hear. It's good to see that some political figures can still remain polite and cordial in public. If this was a Democrat leaving, I'm sure they would do it kicking and screaming. Hell, I doubt a lefty would even have the decency to retire. Not under Trump. They would stay on the bench until they died on it. Without Kennedy, the court will be split between 4 liberal justices who were appointed by Democratic presidents and 4 conservatives who were named by Republicans. Trump's nominee is likely to give the conservatives a solid majority and will face a Senate process in which Republicans hold the slimmest majority, but Democrats can't delay confirmation. Trump's first high court nominee, Justice Neil Gorsuch, was confirmed in April 2017. If past practice is any indication, Trump will name a nominee within weeks, setting in motion a process that could allow confirmation of a new justice by early August. Trump already has a list of 25 25 candidates, 24 judges, and Utah Senator Mike Lee, and said he would choose a nominee from that list. Wow, this is really happening fast, huh? By the end of the summer, we will have a second conservative, Trump-appointed justice on the Supreme Court, and because of it, the United States and thus the world will be better off for it. I can see why Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell could barely hold back his excitement on TV today. This is big, guys. I can't overstate how impactful a good Supreme Court justice can be. Just think about what we read about Kennedy's long and storied career before. He served for 30 years and ruled on all sorts of big issues like voting, abortion, affirmative action, and equal rights. Sure, the president is still the most powerful and influential political position in the country, but the Supreme Court justices are very close seconds. I greatly look forward to seeing the nominees from Trump and seeing who eventually makes it. In fact, let's turn to a video of the man himself, President Trump, commenting on the Supreme Court situation.
Justice Kennedy will be retiring, and he is a man that I've known for a long time and a man that I've respected for a long time. He's been a great justice of the Supreme Court. He is a man who is displaying great vision. He's displayed tremendous vision and tremendous heart.
Sounds like a resounding complimentary farewell to Kennedy coming from the president. And this is how politics are supposed to work, folks. People may have disagreements, we may hate each other for this or that, but publicly, in the business, you handle things respectfully and with care. Now, I know Kennedy and Trump are both conservative leaning, but I think the two would have acted the same if they were political opponents as well. And the left-wingers who have been crying on TV and yelling at people in the streets and calling for more harassment at press conferences and kicking their opponents out of restaurants, well, the liberals should really take a note from Trump and Kennedy here today. They have shown that they are classy adults in politics, and the only ones doing it right these days. And contradictory, the left are being a bunch of crying children.
And we will begin our search for a new justice of the United States Supreme Court that will begin immediately. And hopefully we're going to pick somebody who will be as outstanding. So I just want to thank Justice Kennedy for the years of tremendous service.
It's also worth noting again that Kennedy is going out on top. Sure, he's really old and 81 is nothing to shake your head about, but he's also still highly lucid and able-bodied. He could go on for more and more years if he wanted, but he doesn't. He doesn't want to stay on and start to deteriorate. And he also probably thought it would be a good time to retire since he could pass his spot off to a Trump-appointed conservative. In the end, we've seen 3 big wins from the Supreme Court for conservatives this week. And this was after already winning all week before. It's really starting to look like Trump held his end of the promise from the campaign when he said we would keep on winning and winning. We truly can't stop winning, guys. In fact, we're winning so much now, we're starting to get sick of it. Sometimes I just gotta go out and lose something on purpose. Place a bad bet or play a video game and tank it, just so I can remember what losing feels like. What do you guys think? Should Trump's travel ban have been withheld? Why do Democrats want more Muslims in America anyway? And unlimited immigration? And what do you think about Kennedy's retirement? I know I'm personally looking forward to even more conservative wins on the Supreme Court for decades and decades into the future. Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. See y'all next time.